I pulled the trigger and shot down a drone, right over my own deck, and moments later the HOA that owned it, the Osprey Ridge Conservancy, slapped me with a federal lawsuit, demanding damages for technological aggression. But what they didn't realize was that I wasn't just some disgruntled homeowner with a shotgun. I was holding a briefcase filled with ironclad proof of their sprawling, illegal surveillance operation. A conspiracy so deep it ultimately took down the most powerful woman in their entire community. This is the story of how I, Ethan Cole, 45, former NCIS special agent, now a low-key lecturer in security studies, had to trade my quiet life in the mountains for a courtroom war just to win back the only thing I truly crave: absolute, undistracted solitude. I'd always pursued that kind of deep quiet, not the silence of an empty hotel room or some forced corporate retreat, but the kind that actually breathes, the high-altitude hush that settles over the Cascade foothills when the wind dies, and the only sound is the soft, geological grind of stone shifting beneath the earth. That's why I bought 12 secluded acres near Osprey Creek, Oregon, carved out of an old logging parcel years before the first McMansion HOA sprung up nearby, meaning my deed was clean, no covenants, no restrictions, no suburban tyrant allowed to fret over my paint choices or the height of my firewood pile. Just tall pines, clean air, and the blessed peace I'd earned after 2 decades chasing smugglers and spies across the globe. I figured my days of tactical observation were over. Teaching board college kids the theory of threat assessment was dull, sure, but it was safe. A far cry from kicking down doors in Manila, and out here, I didn't have to be Agent Cole anymore. I was just Ethan, tending my garden and enjoying my custom-built outdoor cedar sauna, the one tucked away in the deepest part of the property, utterly invisible to the world. That was the deal, so when the drone first appeared, a sleek, compact quadcopter, dark gray, almost invisible against the tree canopy, quiet enough to be genuinely unsettling, I assumed it was a lost Amazon delivery or some kid testing out his new birthday toy. I watched it circle once, right along the edge of the creek, and I just gave it a lazy wave, figuring that was the end of it. But the next day, it was back, this time closer, lingering above the tree line, rotating slowly like a suspicious crow. And then on the third day, it was at dawn, hovering outside my bedroom window while I was shaving, silent, motionless, a piece of sophisticated technology acting like a goddamn digital mosquito that had no clue I kept a well-maintained, fully loaded Mossberg 590 just inside the mudroom. By the end of the week, it had established a fixed schedule, always the same flight path, always arriving between 6 and 6:30 in the morning, or just after the sun dipped below the ridge. It never flew directly over the cabin, but it was undeniably bold, performing tight, banked circles over my porch, and yes, performing slow, deliberate passes over the isolated cedar sauna, the place I went to be completely unobserved. That detail, the persistence near the sauna, that's what flipped the switch for me. The private space I built specifically for absolute privacy was now the object of high-tech scrutiny, and the feeling wasn't just annoyance, it was a physical, clinching violation. I immediately reverted to old habits, starting a detailed surveillance log in a leather-bound notebook, meticulously recording the time, duration, altitude, and vector of every single flight. I even named the thing, calling it the Gray Ghost because it materialized and vanished with such unsettling silence. Within 3 days, I had 3 motion-triggered trail cameras installed, one high on the eastern ridge, one near the pump house, and one aimed directly at the sauna enclosure. The footage confirmed my gut feeling. The ghost always approached from the northeast, near the boundary line shared with the Osprey Ridge Conservancy, ORC, and the timestamps allowed me to plot its flight path with forensic accuracy, confirming a highly disciplined, almost military-grade flight pattern, definitely not the clumsy work of an amateur. The moment of absolute certainty came when I reviewed a high-magnification clip from the pump house camera. The Gray Ghost was hovering, not just looking, but performing a complex maneuver, its nose dipping sharply as the optics module pivoted, capturing a perfect shot of the sauna roof. And when I ran the clip through a spectral filter, the evidence was undeniable. It was using active infrared scanning. This wasn't just a violation of property rights. This was electronic stalking, pure and simple, and I knew from my NCIS days how quickly low-level surveillance escalated into a full-blown threat. So I stopped reacting and started planning. I wasn't going to confront them. I was going to build an airtight federal case, logging every minute, every movement, collecting enough digital documentation to bury the operator beneath a mountain of felonies. The old silence, the humming solitude, it was gone now, replaced by a low-level buzz of anticipation, a feeling I hadn't enjoyed since I left the agency, the feeling of being in the hunt. The first move came from them, not the drone, but a piece of thick, starched paper delivered in a sterile, embossed envelope. No return address, of course, just the smug letterhead of the Osprey Ridge Conservancy Architectural Review Board. The letter, drafted in the most pretentious corporate speak imaginable, claimed my property, did not conform to the established visual sight lines of the Osprey Ridge community, and cited my non-standard structure, the beautiful, hand-built cedar sauna, as failing their aesthetic expectations, ending with the polite, yet unmistakable, threat of punitive action. I laughed out loud, a harsh, dry sound. My closest neighbor was half a mile away, and the ORC's official boundary ended at the crest of the secondary ridge, meaning they had zero legal jurisdiction over my parcel. But I'd learned early in my career that the most dangerous weapon in a fight isn't always a bomb. Sometimes it's just a highly specific legal document wielded by someone with an excess of time and a deficit of humility. To be thorough, I called the county recorder's office, confirmed my plat maps were ironclad, recorded the conversation for good measure, and filed the letter and the audio right next to my growing drone log. 2 days later, the absurdity continued. A beat-up Ford Ranger with magnet signs for Foothills Geotechnical Survey rolled up my drive, and out stepped a man named Marcus Dunn, dressed in safety gear, carrying a heavy tripod and a clipboard. "Morning, sir," he called out, all fake cheer and 2 quick smiles. "Just a quick recheck for the ORC, a small boundary discrepancy near the old creek bed, routine stuff." "Routine for who, Marcus?" I asked, my voice flat, holding his gaze. "Because my land isn't part of the ORC." He stammered slightly, adjusting his vest. Well, there's been some confusion with the original survey. Just confirming your utility shed doesn't cross the easement." I knew he was full of it, but I let him set up, watching his every move through the polarized glass of my window, documenting his truck's license plate, his equipment serial numbers, and his movements with my high-res Nikon. As expected, he spent most of his survey time standing by the sauna enclosure, not surveying the creek boundary, but aiming his laser scanner down at the earth near the corner of the structure, clearly documenting, not measuring. That evening, I decided to stop waiting for them to make a real move and plant the bait myself. Using my old agency-issued GIS software, the same kind used to map terrorist safe houses, I created a highly convincing but entirely fictitious plat amendment map showing a non-existent survey error near the sauna, claiming it encroached upon a hypothetical Osprey Ridge wetland buffer zone. I strategically left the map, inside a folder labeled Pending County Review, Zoning Conflict, on my outdoor workbench, perfectly visible to any drone camera performing a low pass. The genius of the trap lay in the false data. I embedded a series of subtle coordinates into the map's file metadata that would only be visible if copied and analyzed under a specific spectrum of UV light. Meaning if the ORC used this map in any future correspondence, I'd have an unassailable fingerprint linking them to the stolen, fabricated data. I didn't have to wait long. 4 days later, the starched envelope returned, this time citing recent geotechnical findings and demanding I relocate the sauna because it was a prohibited encroachment into the aforementioned wetland buffer zone. I didn't just laugh, I almost cried with satisfaction. They had taken the bait hook, line, and sinker. They hadn't just used the map, they had referenced the fake zone created entirely in my imagination. This wasn't simple overreach. This was document fraud and attempted land coercion, and I finally had the evidence of collusion between the ORC board and their contracted surveyor. They wanted that strip of my land, and they were willing to commit felonies to get it. They hadn't just chosen the wrong neighbor, they had chosen the wrong target. The peace was completely shattered now, replaced by the humming tension of a tripwire about to snap. I spent the next morning setting up a 6-camera defensive perimeter around the entire southern ridge, making sure that every possible angle was covered, and then I waited for the gray ghost to make its final, fatal pass. It was Tuesday evening, a golden hour, the sun setting deep crimson over the peaks, and I was on the porch, nursing a neat bourbon, when the silence broke again, not with a buzz, but with a faint, mechanical whisper, a distant flutter that only my trained ear could catch. The gray ghost was back. I put the glass down, slowly, savoring the moment, then stood and reached for the Mossberg 590 resting against the doorframe, a simple, reliable 12-gauge pump, loaded with federal premium copper-plated number 4 buckshot, legal for small game, highly effective, and entirely appropriate for eliminating technological pests operating illegally over my private land. The drone emerged from the trees, lower than ever, slower, like a predator confident in its stealth. It hovered directly in front of me, 12 feet away, its lens tilted down, seeking me out. I saw my own reflection in the dark eye of the camera, calm, focused, ready. I didn't shout a warning. I didn't make a gesture. I just shouldered the weapon and pulled the trigger. The blast was concussive, ripping the silence to shreds, and the gray ghost simply disintegrated midair, a cloud of plastic shrapnel and sparking circuitry that spiraled down and crashed into the thick undergrowth with a final, satisfying crunch. My ears were ringing, smoke curled from the barrel, and for the first time in weeks, the silence returned, the real kind. I reloaded, walked out, gathered the wreckage in a heavy-duty evidence bag, tagging the location with a GPS unit before taking the pieces inside for immediate analysis. The cavalry arrived the next morning. 2 sheriff's deputies, professional, courteous, one of them, Deputy Rios, doing all the talking. Mr. Cole, we have a complaint filed by Ms. Priscilla Vance, chair of the Osprey Ridge Conservancy, stating you discharged a firearm at and destroyed their private aerial survey equipment. I smiled thinly, inviting them onto the porch, offering coffee. I already had the encrypted flash drive sitting on the table. That equipment wasn't surveying anything, Deputy. It was stalking me. Here, this drive contains the full flight logs from the last 21 days, timestamps, and video evidence, including the moment it activated its infrared camera over my private residence. They took the drive, their casual demeanor instantly replaced by professional curiosity, and after a brief, tense exchange, Deputy Rios noting, "You've got quite a setup here," and me replying, "I don't film people while they drink coffee, Deputy, and I expect the same courtesy." They left. An hour later, the inevitable email arrived from the ORC's legal counsel, demanding $6,500 for the destruction of their essential community monitoring instrument, citing multiple violations of state property code and threatening a full civil suit. I just stared at the screen, freezing the last frame from the drone footage, the warped reflection of my face, calm, determined. This wasn't about money or one plastic drone. This was a power play, an attempt to find me into submission and establish a legal precedent over my land. But I had something far better than an angry lawyer. I had forensic discipline. I stripped down the drone wreckage on my workbench. My initial suspicions were confirmed instantly. This wasn't an off-the-shelf consumer model. The GPS board was a specialized, military-grade telemetry logging module with expanded memory, and the onboard storage was a custom, 64 gigabytes encrypted, heat-shielded SSD. It was designed to survive a crash and protect its data. It took me 4 hours to crack the baseline encryption using old agency software, but when the drive opened, the data was stunning. 68 separate missions logged over the past 90 days, every single flight path centered exclusively on my property, never once surveying the communal areas or other HOA tracks. The mission parameters confirmed it. This was a targeted, deep penetration surveillance operation. The footage itself made my skin crawl. Tight zoom shots of my upstairs bedroom window at 3 a.m., thermal scans of my chimney, and the utterly invasive close-ups taken while I was in the sauna. I printed the log summaries, burned 4 encrypted copies on as separate drives, mailing one to my former agency colleague who now specialized in digital forensics, and another to my longtime lawyer in Portland, just establishing an undeniable chain of custody. Then I filed my complaints. One with the FAA for illegal operations in restricted airspace, night flights, no mandated identification, and a major one with the county district attorney for criminal harassment, invasion of privacy, and attempted land fraud. But the most satisfying find came during my protocol vehicle sweep. Tucked high up under the rear chassis of my SUV, magnetically mounted, was a high-end cellular-enabled GPS tracker, military spec, not the cheap Amazon garbage. I documented it, photographed the serial number, and handed it to Deputy Rios when he returned for a follow-up. He looked genuinely uncomfortable when I laid the device on a clean cloth on my workbench. "This was on your vehicle, Mr. Cole?" "Yes, Deputy. Professionally wired, discreet. Only someone specifically trained to look for it would find it." 3 days later, Rios called. The tracker was registered through a series of shell companies, but the payment trail led back to an expense account linked to the Osprey Ridge Conservancy's operational budget. The dots were connecting into a very clear, very damning line. The ORC officially filed their civil suit against me. A smug, overblown document claiming I committed technological sabotage and physical aggression against communal assets. I filed my counterclaim immediately. Violation of federal drone laws, unlawful surveillance, trespassing, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and felony harassment. My final piece of initial evidence was the coup de grace, a screenshot from the Gray Ghost mission software, zoomed in on my southern boundary, showing a manually placed blinking red waypoint, labeled simply, Target 8. They hadn't just watched me. They had literally labeled me as an asset on a tactical map. The lawsuit didn't scare me. It just focused me. They wanted a precedent, a fine, in my land. I decided to give them a disaster. I started by digging into the surveyor, Marcus Dunn. A quick search through court records, easy for a retired agent, revealed a dismissed civil suit he'd filed against another HOA 2 years prior, claiming breach of contract. A footnote in his deposition jumped out. Client demanded specific, non-geotechnical surveillance tasks that exceeded ethical boundaries. I found Dunn at a rundown bar favored by local logging crews, bought him a double scotch, and quietly mentioned the ORC, the wetland buffer zone, and the name Priscilla Vance. His face went instantly pale. He didn't say much, but he confirmed everything. Priscilla, the HOA chair, was obsessed with consolidating the Ridge properties, viewing my large, independent parcel as a cancer on her vision of a pristine, unified community. He confirmed she supplied him with custom, hand-drawn maps and paid him extra under the table to document my property from specific angles, even telling him where to leave packages of drone batteries and encrypted media cards. With this new testimony, I called my last resource, Laura Chun, an investigative journalist I knew from a messy smuggling case years ago, a woman who specialized in exposing local government corruption. I gave her everything: the drone logs, the tracker report, the fake ORC letters, the recorded testimony from Marcus Dunn, and the Target Z8 screenshot. 3 days later, the story exploded. The Willamette Valley Post ran the headline: ORC chair targets homeowner with military-grade drone surveillance and land fraud plot. The outrage was immediate and overwhelming, going viral in the Pacific Northwest, attracting the attention of state attorneys general and national property rights groups. The county DA, suddenly empowered by the public outcry, subpoenaed the ORC's central office records. The search warrant was executed the next morning, and what they found in Priscilla Vance's locked personal safe was absolute confirmation. A stack of 6 manila folders, each labeled with a dissident homeowner's address, mine included. Inside each folder were high-resolution thermal photos taken by the Gray Ghost, infrared snapshots of children and pets, detailed license plate histories, and handwritten notes like subject Cole, hostile to negotiation, anti-compliance attitude. The final pieces of evidence were the 2 original forged documents, the fake wetland buffer zone plat map, and an altered historical compliance letter, both bearing Priscilla Vance's meticulous signature. The sheriff's department didn't wait for a public hearing. Priscilla Vance was arrested that afternoon. The charges: felony forgery, criminal conspiracy, wire fraud, and electronic harassment. Her mugshot, tight-lipped, enraged, the perfect distillation of petty bureaucratic malice, ran alongside my calm, 10-year-old NCIS portrait on the evening news. The civil trial, when it finally arrived, was an anticlimax. The old courthouse in Osprey Creek was cold, dusty, smelling of old leather and deferred maintenance. Priscilla sat across from me, stiff, dressed in an expensive but ill-fitting suit, her lawyer already defeated. My evidence was a wall of forensic fact: the digital chain of custody, the Target Z8 file, the authenticated drone wreckage, and the signed affidavit from Marcus Dunn. Priscilla's defense, that she was merely preserving community harmony against a dangerously independent and hostile landowner, only served to further illuminate her tyrannical motives. When it was my turn, I kept it brief, professional, and deadly honest. I told the judge I had moved here for legal independence, that I had no fiduciary duty to the ORC, and that for 3 months I had been digitally stalked, thermally scanned, mapped, and baited with documents that were pure criminal fiction. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for protecting property rights, took 2 days to deliver her final order, and it was a masterpiece of legal vindication. First, I was awarded $450,000 in damages, covering emotional distress, legal fees, and punitive damages for federal airspace and privacy violations. The ORC, she ruled, must pay by liquidating their non-essential holdings, effectively bankrupting their slush funds. Second, Priscilla Vance was sentenced to 10 years, with 3 years served in prison, the remainder monitored, along with a permanent ban from serving in any position of authority within a regulated community. Third, and perhaps most satisfyingly, the judge ordered a mandatory, full-page public apology from the ORC, published in every major Oregon newspaper and mailed to every single resident, stating, "We acknowledge the gross and criminal conduct of our former leadership, including unlawful surveillance and fraud, and affirm that these acts were a profound betrayal of property rights." And my final request, the one I didn't care about the money for, the judge required the ORC to donate $35,000 to the Oregon Land Liberty Fund, an organization that helps homeowners fight abusive HOA practices. It was a victory not just for me, but for every homeowner in the valley being bullied over a misplaced flower pot. I walked out of the courtroom, past the cameras swarming Priscilla as she was led away in cuffs, and I didn't say a single word, no victory lap, no grand statement, just the sound of my boots on the concrete and the clean, cold Oregon air. I had no HOA, no leash, and finally, no one circling my skies. The silence is back now, the deep, geological kind that hums through the earth, not the uneasy quiet of someone watching. I had a sign installed last month, brushed stainless steel, right where the gray ghost crashed into the creek bed. It reads, "No HOA. No spying. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Locals love it. Tourists take selfies with it. And yes, sometimes I look at it, and I open the case I keep in my study. Inside is the crumpled, scorched shell of the gray ghost. My souvenir. I didn't win because I shot a drone. I won because they were operating on the assumption of my ignorance. And I won because I knew the law and the logistics of surveillance better than they ever could. So that's my story. It's a messy one, and it raises a lot of complicated questions about property rights versus community control, about how much privacy we sacrifice to live near other people. I want to know what you think. Was shooting down the drone a justified act of defending my privacy and property, or was it a reckless escalation? Was Priscilla Vance just an overzealous HOA chair, or a genuine criminal mastermind driven by greed? And if you have your own stories about HOAs, nosy neighbors, or times you had to fight for your solitude, drop them in the comments below. Let's talk about where the line actually is.